Antarctica is the most hostile environment on the face of the Earth. It is a blinding, desolate expanse of white, covering an area larger than the United States and Mexico combined. It holds 90% of the world's ice and 70% of its fresh water. During the deep winter, temperatures can plummet to minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit. A cold so absolute that it can shatter solid steel and freeze human flesh in a matter of seconds. For centuries, explorers, scientists, and mapmakers have viewed the southernmost continent as a dead, frozen wasteland. A place completely devoid of civilization. A place where human history never took root. We are taught that beneath the 2 miles of crushing glacial ice, there is nothing but barren bedrock. But what if the ice is not a tomb? What if, instead, the ice is a blanket? In recent years, the deployment of highly advanced satellite technology, ground-penetrating radar, and thermal imaging has begun to peel back the blinding white veil of Antarctica. And what the data is revealing is sending waves of absolute panic through the highest levels of the international scientific and military communities. They did not just find a few anomalous rocks. They did not just find an unknown mountain range. Deep beneath the ice of Wilkes Land and the Piri Reis sectors, they discovered something massive. They found a complex geometric anomaly stretching for dozens of miles. It features right angles, concentric rings, and colossal, dome-like structures that defy any natural geological formation. They found a hidden city. But the most terrifying and paradigm-shattering aspect of this discovery is not just the architecture. It is the temperature. According to classified thermal imaging data, the caverns housing this massive complex are not frozen. They are warm. Today, we are going to journey to the absolute bottom of the world. We are going to look past the official narratives and dive into the deeply classified data. We will explore the impossible thermal anomalies of the Antarctic crust, the suppressed historical accounts of military expeditions that encountered things they could not explain, and the chilling realization that a highly advanced civilization has been sleeping beneath the ice for thousands of years, and the machinery keeping them warm might still be turned on. To understand how an entire city could exist, let alone stay warm, under 2 miles of solid ice, we have to look at the cutting edge of glaciology and subterranean geography. For decades, scientists believed that the base of the Antarctic ice sheet was frozen solid to the bedrock. But in the late 20th century, airborne radar surveys revealed something astonishing. Subglacial lakes. Liquid water miles beneath the surface. The most famous of these is Lake Vostok, a body of water the size of Lake Ontario, buried under nearly 2.5 miles of ice. How does water stay liquid in the coldest place on Earth? The answer is geothermal heat. Antarctica is home to a massive, highly active volcanic rift system. Mount Erebus is the most famous surface volcano, but deep beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, there are dozens of hidden volcanoes and geothermal vents constantly radiating immense thermal energy. This heat melts the bottom layer of the ice, creating massive pressurized subterranean rivers and vast cavernous pockets of warm air and liquid water. It is within one of these massive thermally heated subglacial caverns that the anomaly was detected. When NASA launched the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment known as GRACE, the satellites mapped the gravitational anomalies of the Earth. They detected a massive gravitational fluctuation beneath the Wilkes Land crater region. Officially, science states this is the remnant of an ancient asteroid impact. But independent analysts who processed the raw, unfiltered radar data noticed that the structure beneath the ice was too symmetrical to be a crater. The ground-penetrating radar returned images of a grid, a massive, perfectly laid out network of intersecting lines towering foundational blocks, and a central hub that looks terrifyingly similar to a modern metropolis. The scale is staggering. The central dome structure is estimated to be over 3 miles wide. But what truly baffled the analysts was the thermal signature. The ambient temperature within this massive cavern is estimated to be a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a tropical microclimate, buried beneath billions of tons of freezing ice. But this heat is not chaotic. Natural geothermal vents are wild and unpredictable. They boil water, they release toxic sulfur dioxide, and they fluctuate in temperature. The thermal imaging of this subterranean city shows something entirely different. The heat is evenly distributed. It flows in perfectly straight lines, running through what appear to be massive, artificial conduits underneath the floor of the complex. The geothermal energy of the Earth is not just leaking into this cavern. It is being harvested. It is being managed by a thermodynamic engineering system of unimaginable scale and sophistication. Who could have possibly built a thermodynamically heated megalopolis in Antarctica? To answer that, we must shatter another illusion. Antarctica was not always covered in ice. Geologists know that due to continental drift, Antarctica was once located closer to the equator. During the Eocene epoch, roughly 50 million years ago, the continent was covered in lush, tropical rainforests, teeming with life. But mainstream science dictates that the ice sheet completely engulfed the continent about 15 million years ago, long before the first hominids even learned to walk upright in Africa. However, there is a piece of historical evidence that violently contradicts this timeline. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map using much older, ancient source maps from the Library of Alexandria. The Piri Reis map shows the coast of South America, Africa, and, impossibly, the northern coast of Antarctica. But it does not show Antarctica covered in ice. It shows a highly detailed, ice-free coastline, complete with river valleys, estuaries, and mountain ranges. Modern seismic surveys conducted by international glaciological teams in the mid-20th century confirmed that the topography of the bedrock beneath the ice perfectly matches the coastline drawn on the Piri Reis map. How could ancient cartographers, supposedly lacking any advanced technology, accurately map a coastline that has been buried under a mile of ice for millions of years? Unless the ice is not millions of years old. Alternative historians and rogue geologists propose the crustal displacement theory, championed by Charles Hapgood and famously endorsed by Albert Einstein. This theory suggests that the Earth's outer crust can occasionally shift violently in one single, catastrophic movement over the liquid mantle. If this happened, a landmass sitting in a temperate zone could be thrust into the polar region in a matter of days. The sudden catastrophic change in climate would flash freeze the entire continent. If a highly advanced global civilization existed prior to this cataclysm, let's call them the pre-Adamites or the architects of Atlantis, they would have had very little time to react. Faced with a sudden apocalyptic deep freeze that was instantly turning their temperate continent into an icy hell, they could not escape across the oceans in time. Their only option for survival would be to go down. They used their advanced technology to bore deep into the bedrock, tapping directly into the volcanic veins of the continent. They built massive shielded domes to protect their cities from the crushing weight of the encroaching glaciers. They essentially built a self-sustaining geothermal lifeboat, and the thermal data suggests that this lifeboat is still functioning. This theory sounds like absolute science fiction, but if it is entirely false, then we must ask a very dark, very uncomfortable question regarding the actions of the modern military. In 1946, just months after the end of the Second World War, the United States military launched Operation Highjump. It was the largest naval expedition ever sent to Antarctica, commanded by the legendary Admiral Richard E. Byrd. The armada included aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and over 4,000 heavily armed troops. The official narrative was that this was a scientific training exercise to test military equipment in cold conditions. But why send a massive, combat-ready armada to a frozen wasteland immediately after the most devastating war in human history, when the military budget was being slashed and soldiers just wanted to go home? What were they fighting? The expedition was scheduled to last for 8 months. Instead, they retreated after just a few weeks, suffering mysterious aircraft losses and casualties that were immediately classified. Upon returning to the United States, Admiral Byrd gave a highly controversial interview to a South American newspaper. He warned that the United States must immediately take defensive measures against enemy aircraft that possessed the ability to fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. Shortly after this interview, Admiral Byrd was hospitalized. His diaries were confiscated by the Department of Defense, and he was ordered to remain completely silent. However, rumors and allegedly leaked pages from his private flight logs paint a terrifying picture. According to these accounts, while flying over a remote sector of the Antarctic interior, Byrd's instruments completely failed. The magnetic compass spun wildly. He flew through a strange, glowing fog, and suddenly found himself no longer over ice, but flying over a massive, green, ice-free valley. He reported seeing strange, mammoth-like animals and towering crystalline structures that looked like a glowing city. He claimed his radio was hijacked, and a voice speaking in heavily accented English ordered him to land, stating that he had breached the airspace of the Ariani, the inner world. For decades, the story of Admiral Byrd's secret diary has been dismissed as a hoax. But in the context of modern satellite thermal imaging, detecting warm, geometric anomalies beneath the ice, his fantastical story takes on a chilling new weight. Did the United States military discover the hidden city in 1946? Did they realize that the inhabitants of this subterranean metropolis possessed technology, those flying machines that could travel from pole to pole, that made the atomic bomb look like a primitive firecracker? The reaction of the global superpowers following Operation Highjump is the smoking gun. In 1959, the nations of the world, deep in the paranoia of the Cold War, did something completely unprecedented. They signed the Antarctic Treaty. The United States, the Soviet Union, and all other major powers agreed to completely demilitarize the continent. They agreed that no nation could claim sovereignty, and absolutely no private corporate mining or drilling would be allowed. We live in a world where superpowers will wage bloody, decades-long wars over a few oil fields in the desert. Yet, we are supposed to believe that these same aggressive, resource-hungry empires looked at an entire continent, a landmass larger than Europe, completely unexploited, and universally agreed to just leave it alone for the sake of science? It defies all geopolitical logic. Unless they didn't leave it alone for science, they left it alone because they were told to. Because whoever or whatever controls the warm city beneath the ice established a boundary. The Antarctic Treaty is not an environmental protection agreement. It is a quarantine zone. Today, the perimeter of the continent is guarded by heavy military presence under the guise of scientific research outposts. Independent expeditions that attempt to venture too far into the interior, specifically near the magnetic anomalies of Wilkes Land or the Queen Maud Land sectors, are routinely intercepted by unmarked military helicopters and turned back under the threat of lethal force. High-level scientists who travel to the South Pole are forced to sign draconian non-disclosure agreements that carry the penalty of federal treason. But the superpowers are facing a new, terrifying variable that they cannot control with treaties or military cordons. The ice is melting. Global climate change is fundamentally altering the Antarctic landscape. The massive Thwaites Glacier, grimly referred to as the Doomsday Glacier, is fracturing from below, being eaten away by warming ocean currents. As billions of tons of ice melt and break off into the sea, the immense crushing pressure on the continental bedrock is shifting. The thick, 2-mile blanket that has kept the hidden city entombed and out of sight is rapidly thinning. What happens when the ice recedes enough to expose the grand domes and towering spires of the subterranean metropolis? Will we finally see the ancient, interlocking basalt blocks and the glowing thermal conduits with our own eyes? And more importantly, what happens to the microclimate of the city when the ceiling finally breaches? The thermal signatures tell us that the city is still warm. The geometric heat distribution tells us that the thermodynamic machinery is still actively pumping energy. A machine does not run for 10,000 years by accident. It requires maintenance. It requires an operator. We look at the frozen wastes of Antarctica and we see the end of the world. But for the entities residing in the warm, illuminated caverns miles beneath the surface, the ice is not a wasteland. It is a fortress wall. They have sat in the dark, harvesting the fire of the earth, silently surviving the cataclysms that wiped our history clean. They have watched our primitive empires rise and fall, entirely unconcerned with the squabbles of the surface dwellers. But as the ice continues to fracture, the wall is coming down. The greatest archaeological discovery in the history of the human race is waiting in the dark, warm depths of the South Pole. The only question is, when the ice finally melts and the doors of the hidden city open, what exactly is going to come out? What do you think is generating the heat beneath the ice of Antarctica? Is it the automated machinery of a long-dead, ancient human civilization? Or is the city still occupied by an intelligence that we are completely unprepared to face? If you were a scientist standing over the drill hole, looking down into a warm, illuminated cavern, would you dare to climb down? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. The truth is out there, but sometimes it is buried under 2 miles of solid ice. If this investigation into the forbidden secrets of Antarctica sent a chill down your spine, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We are exploring the darkest, most heavily guarded mysteries of our planet every single week. Click the video on your screen right now to dive into the terrifying anomalies found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and I will see you in the next one. Stay curious, and remember to look beneath the surface.